All right, welcome to another episode of Mafia Monday with Jason Jordan. So today I wanted to talk about the commission trials that took place in the 1980s and took out basically the 5 family mafia bosses, how they came about and where we started and how we got there. If you're ever looking for a good piece of educational material on this stuff, is a great documentary on Netflix called Fear City. It's phenomenal. It talks about a lot of what I'm going to talk about today and then some, like the Concrete Club and other things that we won't get into today. But what's really cool about it is you get to hear a lot of the wiretaps when they actually bug the bosses or bug some of these street bosses and capos and soldiers. You actually get to hear them on audio and what led to their downfall. So it's really intriguing. So how did we get to take down all 5 bosses, right? How did we get to that point? Well, it's called RICO. Many of you have probably heard of that, Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act, right? It was drafted in 1970 by a guy named Robert Blakey. Robert Blakey was a federal prosecutor, but what's really important about Robert Blakey, in my opinion, is he was working in the Justice Department and standing next to Robert Kennedy when Robert Kennedy finds out that John Kennedy had been shot in Dallas. So on November 22nd, 1963, John Kennedy gets killed. Blakey thinks it's the Mafia. I think it's the Mafia in conjunction with the CIA. I think Robert Kennedy believed it was that as well. And, they're all horrified, but they know what's going on. They know kind of how they got there. And they know right away. Evidently, recently we just heard that RFK had contacted 2 or 3 people in the CIA, first phone call, and just asked, was this your people? They suspected it right away, but it was in conjunction with the mob, and Blakey suspected that as well. Well, he, I believe, winds up on the Warren Commission or the Commission on Assassinations, and working for the federal government, he drafts a organized crime act that includes RICO, the Racketeer and Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act. So what this act does is basically allows the government to put on evidence that shows there's an organization, you're part of it, and these are the types of crimes that they're doing, and you can go down for other people's crimes within the organization. So prior to that, as you can imagine, you got to catch the person robbing a bank. You got to have evidence about a specific crime that person was engaged in. The problem with getting to the bosses and trying to dismantle a mob family or mob families was the bosses never have their hand in anything. They're giving messages to their underbosses who then give it downhill to a captain, give something to their soldiers, and then they and the associates are going and committing the crimes. You get nabbed for bank robbery, maybe you get 5 years, you're out in 2.5. The old Omerta code of silence really lasted for a long time. Guys would shut their mouths and do 2 years, 5 years. I mean, hell, Gotti got something like 5 years and served something like 4 for murder. But as happens later on down the road with drugs, right, heroin distribution, etc., guys are getting 100 years. Well, it's not as easy to do 100 years. It's not as easy to do 50 years when you're 40 years old. So guys would flip, they'd turn rat, right? They would become an informant, they'd work with the government. So there was like a prohibition. They didn't want people dealing in drugs, even though they knew they kind of were. The reasoning was, of course, because the sentences were so damn stiff. Well, the RICO statute comes into play, and they're going to have stiff penalties as well. But nobody really knows about it. The mob guys don't really even know what RICO is. You'll even see in Fear City when all these mob bosses get arrested and they're charged with RICO, the guys are laughing like, what's this? RICO? What's that? They had no idea. And smart guys like Michael Francis saw the writing on the wall that you can't survive in this, right? There's just no way now. You can literally put me away for something that guy did, right? Or something this guy ratted on that guy. So ultimately what happens is Blakey sits back from 1970 to about 1979 and just sees the federal government and these federal prosecutors are not doing anything with it. They're not using it. They have no idea what it is. He calls up the Southern District of New York and says, send me your agents up to Cornell. He was teaching there, I believe, as a law professor. And they went up there, some of them begrudgingly, and they spent a weekend learning how RICO works. They come back down to New York and they have a whole new outlook on how they're going to prosecute the mafia. So they start putting together a case. Well, how does that work? I need informants. I need evidence. I need to be able to find something, someone willing to talk, to tell me something that will lead to probable cause that'll get me a wiretap. So I meet a couple guys who are on my informant list I'm paying for, let's say, as a prosecutor or as an agent, and I get them to tell me this guy committed this crime or works in a car theft racket with this guy. I might be able to bug that person getting probable cause by a judge. Well, you then work your way up to getting more information to being able to bug the boss himself. And what you get to see in Fear City is you get to hear Tony Dux Corallo, you get to hear Fat Tony Salerno, you get to hear Vincent the Chin Gigante and these guys, John Gotti. You get to hear them on the bugs that ultimately put them away. You get to actually hear them talking about their criminal activity, not realizing, A, they're being bugged, and not realizing that how they were bugged is actually fascinating as well if you watch the documentary. But they actually walk you through how they got the probable cause, how they were able to infiltrate a house or a restaurant or someone's car, where they placed the bug. And then you get to hear some of it as well. So they come in and they basically round everybody up. I believe one day in 1985, they arrest all the bosses and they charge them all with a RICO conspiracy, RICO acts. And the predicates are individual separate predicates to keep those cases going, the underlying criminal acts. And they're all looking at 100 years, other than Castellano, who obviously gets murdered, clipped, and taken out by John Gotti December 16, 1985. He never saw his justice, right? He never saw his day in court. That's kind of where we started, was with this typical individual catch me if you can, but all of a sudden they don't even know there's this law that's been around that really started from a guy who was there when Kennedy was killed and really believed it was part of the mafia, took it on as part of his goal in his career was to take down the mafia, was on the Commission on Assassinations, drafts this bill that Nixon signs in 1970, watches kind of in horror that it's not being used, helps educate the individual agents who he knows are working at trying to prosecute the mafia, and within 6 years all the bosses are taken down, and really you see a very, very quick decline to pretty rapidly just being completely beaten up and taken apart piece by piece by the government. They changed the rules. That's what happened. They changed the rules, and the bad guys didn't know what rules they were playing by anymore, and it came as a shock to them. So anyways, another episode of Mafia Monday. Hope that was interesting. Tune in for the next one.